All right. Hi, Ghassan and Doug. Thank you for joining me here today on Vonvo.com to discuss the conflict going on in Syria. It is January 27th. I just wanted to make you both aware of two things before we got started. First, this conversation is right now being recorded, and after it's completed, we'll be posting it onto our YouTube channel. Ghassan and Doug, are you both okay with doing that?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Okay, great. And then just the other important note, Doug, I know I mentioned this to you a day or so ago. In terms of Vonvo, we like to keep our conversations respectful, civil, and organized. Do you agree, and Ghassan as well, that we won't have any personal attacks, and we will keep the discussion, strictly, valuable and civil. Is that okay with both of you?
Yes.
Ghassan, that okay with you?
Son.
The audio is very bad. I'm going to turn off my camera in the hope that this will get it better. But I know what you were talking about.
Okay. Good. Okay, so I do hear you fine, just so you know. Um,
Mhm.
and so I guess why don't we get started? Just for any of our viewers who are watching right now, um, Doug, would you mind just giving people who watch this video a quick background of yourself and quick bio so that they know who you are, and then Ghassan, you can go next.
I don't know what to say here. I'm a Israeli American. Supports.
Can you speak up, Doug?
Yes. I'm a supporter of. I'm an Israeli American supporter of Israel and world peace.
Okay, and Ghassan, any quick information you want to give our viewers as well?
Well, I will give myself a slightly different introduction today in light of what Doug has said. I'm a Lebanese Arab, and I'm also a supporter of world peace, and I crave to have peace in the Middle East, a peace that is just, a peace that will give everyone the right of existence.
Great. Okay. And so basically, to get started, I kind of want to take the discussion. I kind of want to have a focus maybe on not only what is going on in Syria, but how maybe, what sort of things can be done to alleviate the situation over there, getting both of your opinions, on what goes on over there and how it can be made better. Because, last week I know Doug, was curious to find out from you, Ghassan, what exact sort of government you support. And I know it was a little off topic last week, but I thought, it would make sense to kind of discuss the forms of government that might, be most appropriate inside of Syria, either keeping it the same as it's been or potentially with, this civil war going on. What potential forms of government would you be supportive of, and we can talk these things out. So I guess starting exactly right there, Ghassan, how would you describe, the Assad regime before, this civil war began, and what exactly do you hope would come out of this civil war, whether Assad is still in power or not? What sort of government would you, be looking to support going into the future?
Okay, well, thank you for the question, Max. As usual, you asked fairly pertinent questions. But before I answer about what the Assad have done to Syria, we have to go a little bit back in history, well, in fact, quite back. Go back perhaps to 1516 precisely, a year during which Syria became under Ottoman occupation. So for the next 400 years that followed, Syria was, you could say, a Turkish colony. And for centuries, being ruled by a foreign power would send any nation into total disarray. And then what happened after that? When the Turks left, the French moved in, and they added insult to injury, as they say. And Syria was left fragmented, weak, no infrastructure, no sense of government in the sense that it is protected by a long history of being in government. Even talking about institution in the system. So what happened was that in Syria in particular, we didn't see much of that, say, in Jordan, Lebanon, and other countries. But in Syria in particular, there was a series of military coups. From the time that Syria joined Egypt in the so-called United Arab Republic, and then its cessation from that union in 1960, there has been a series of military coups over a period of 11 years. And then when Assad's father took power eventually in 1971, I don't have a crystal ball here. Neither did I ever have the chance to interview the man, as it were. But from his actions, it was very obvious. Can you hear me well? Because I keep getting this error signal on my screen. I don't know what it is.
I hear you just fine, actually. I hear you just fine.
Yeah. So the first thing on Assad's agenda was to bring stability to Syria. Now, this is going to be a little bit difficult for most Western peoples, and Doug included, to understand that when you have a situation of total anarchy, chaos, and you want to bring peace and order, you will need, I'm not justifying this, but you do need an iron fist. And I have no doubt that Hafiz Assad ruled with an iron fist, albeit a just iron fist, a fair iron fist, but at least one that was well-intentioned. As I said last time on this interview, probably along the way, some people were mistreated. They were taken as suspects for being Islamists or political activists, etc., unfairly. But the main intention of the Assad legacy was to bring peace and order and security to Syria. And then after that, from that point on, of course, other things came to surface. But the main thing that Assad has stressed on was secularism, because sectarianism has always been a problem in the Middle East. So the state was totally separated from religion.
Right.
I can hear my voice echoing now.
Right, and
okay.
Do you hear me? Do you hear me now?
I haven't finished the answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's better now.
Go ahead.
So the religion and the state were separated, and the state became 100% secular. In fact, the only secular state in the Middle East. Now, Doug may not like hearing this, but I do not believe that Israel is a secular state, for example. And then from that point on, as the priorities become, as they change with the changes of events, the first thing after that was to actually do the political reform. And I do firmly believe that during the last years of his life, of his presidency, Hafiz Assad started this process. And then when his son took over, he actually moved with the process of reform more steadfastly, albeit perhaps seen slow by many observers. But you have to keep in mind that you cannot all of a sudden implement the reform that you would like to implement overnight. It takes time. And for example, I will tell you that some political parties that were totally banned in the 70s, 80s, and 90s were actively engaged in the political life in Syria just 2-3 years ago. And it was not like what some people think. If you criticize the government, you will immediately go to jail. No, there's nothing to that.
Right.
The judicial system worked 100%. Of course, I'm not saying that reform was fully done. It was not fully established. And of course, there was cronyism, and add to that, corruption. Now, Bashar Assad was on the process of implementing those reforms one by one. Perhaps he wasn't quick enough, or maybe he was wise enough not to implement them all at once. I'm not saying either way. All what I know is that if you ask me what form of government do I want for Syria, I tell you that Bashar Assad was definitely 100% on the right track.
Right. So, Doug, in terms of Ghassan's point about, Syria not really having as many difficulties and issues as, let's say, it's portrayed to have now under Assad regime, and it was a secular state. I mean, do you support those items, and do you have a problem, the fact that, maybe there, do you think that there's any credibility to Ghassan's, argument in that he lived there and knew what, that country was about before, let's say, this civil war began?
No, I agree with a lot of the things he said, and I agree that the country needed to be ruled with an iron fist. But
I'm sorry, Doug. I can barely hear you.
Okay, I don't know what I could do to improve that.
If you put your mouse over your face, there is a little microphone button, and you can make your volume louder.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right, there we go.
Is that better?
All right, well,
is that better,
That's much better.
I don't know. I hope you can hear me. Okay, good. Well, I agree 100% that the country needed to be run with an iron fist in order to make some progress. I don't agree with this statement. It's the only secular state, or was the only secular state, because Israel is a secular state. Only 25% of the Israelis are really Orthodox religious, and the seculars control Israel. That's one of the complaints of the religious in Israel. But anyhow, so the point is, which I was asking last week, is, and I made the point that Gaddafi was an iron fist, and things in Libya weren't that bad. Saddam Hussein ruled with an iron fist, and things weren't that bad. Hosni Mubarak ruled with an iron fist, and things weren't that bad. And probably Ghassan's right. The Assads ran it that way, and things are pretty good. Although we don't like the fact that his was the only name on the ballot box, and the people had no choice of who to vote for, and he discouraged political competitors. But if he was more concerned with a secular state, God bless him. But the question is, America seems determined, and then the Western world seems determined to do away with Assad, and the alternative, I think, is the Muslim Brotherhood, which is not a secular type of government, and it's much more oppressive. And so I kind of disagree with what America's done in trying to get rid of all these iron-fisted dictators. And I think the best thing for the people of Syria might be if Assad were to remain in power. But I don't believe, based on what I'm reading in the news reports, that that's going to happen, and that based on the fact that the Muslim Brotherhood is taken over everywhere else, that why shouldn't they also be able to take control of Syria? And when that happens, then you're going to see you're going to see all the abuses of radical Islam in Syria that you see in Egypt, in Gaza, in Libya. You're going to see women's rights abused. You're going to see child brides getting married when they're 8 years old. You're going to see all the horrible people getting stoned to death. I mean, so I guess Ghassan is saying that keeping Assad would be better for the people of Syria, and I probably agree with that. So, but I don't think that's what's going to happen.
Right. So Ghassan, do you want to respond to that? I mean, like, in terms of Doug's point about the Muslim Brotherhood, is that part of what turns you off about who is riding against Assad? And I guess one of the questions I've been meaning to ask you is, you know, even if, let's say, before this civil war occurred, if Assad, was supportive of a secular state, which, most people would think is great, the fact, is there an argument to be made that, there's no way that this individual could continue to be in power based off of what has been done to his people, since the civil war has started? And I mean, obviously, I think there's, a lot of the deaths can be attributed to these different, to the rioters, the people who are going against Assad. But there's definitely, obviously, blame that can come to the Assad regime for killing its civilians. So, is it even, feasible, realistic to, allow someone like that to retain power?
I find myself facing here a multitude of questions, and I think that Doug and I are beginning to agree about certain things, finally. And before I answer your question, Max, I would like to make a little comment about what Doug had to say, that the West seems to be determined to get rid of Assad. Yes, but the Syrian people are determined to keep him. The Syrian people and the Syrian army are totally behind him, and that he has not been pushed away. 2 years into the conflict, and the army is still fairly united. Of course, there are a few little defections here and there, but people can be bought. Certain people can be bought, but not the majority of people. The majority of Syrians are still totally behind their president, and so is the army. And the fact that he's still standing is just a proof. Now, to go back to your question, Max, one of the main problems, according to sources that I have, who are pretty close to the president, the big mistakes he committed was that initially he did not try to clamp that revolt because he did not want any bloodshed, or not much of it. And most, if not all, of the killing that was happening initially by snipers were actually done by the rebels. And at that point in time, the went to actually, oversee those demonstrations were only allowed to carry batons, just in case they felt trigger happy, because the whole idea was to avoid civilian casualties. And then, of course, when things went out of hand, we now see the Syrian army even having to use the air force in some locations. Because what you have at the moment is a real war. It's no longer anything of the nature of street protests for the sake of establishing peace and democracy. It's far from that. You have armies rolling in from Syria, Turkey, all over, from Lebanon, I beg your pardon, Turkey, all over the place. Those rebels have got tanks, anti-aircraft missiles. They are very, very deadly, and you cannot deal with those people. You cannot just give them a slap on the face and expect that they will go home and paint themselves. And they are the ones who are creating the civil casualties by using civilians as human shields. They go to heavily populated civilian areas and they barrack. And the army is left with no choice, either not defending itself, not defending the cities, or let those people roam. It's not an easy choice, Max. Assad did not go out and kill his people as the Western media, as the CNN and Fox and Al Jazeera and all of those anti-Assad media agencies want us to see. It's far from that. The situation on the ground, as I hear it from my friends and relatives in Syria, is totally different. Now, of course, you are going to find people within Syria who are against Assad. And when I hear different arguments, I look at those different arguments from an observer's point of view, and I can smell, if I can put it this way, I can smell where those words are coming from. And when I hear words of just utter hatred and sectarianism towards the president and the army, then I know that those arguments are not ones that I can take seriously and with any kind of credibility. The arguments that I find credibility in are the arguments. They just all happen to be, in fact, arguments that are for the president and not against him.
Right, right. So, Doug, did you have a comment for that at all? Otherwise, I can move into some of.
I'm just wondering. There were some comments on the thread that we were talking about over the last few days about the fact that life in Syria under Assad was pretty good, and even though maybe they didn't have a democratically elected Congress like we do in the United States or Israel or any other country, that life was pretty good, and the average Syrian was pretty happy with his lot. And if that's true, which I think it is, then let's do an experiment in Syria. Let's keep Assad. Let's defeat the rebels and see if we can defeat. Maybe that's what we need to do to defeat these Islamic extremists, the Muslim Brotherhood, etc. I mean, they've got enough countries under their control now. We'll see what happens in Egypt and Libya and everywhere else. Let's keep Syria secular, and maybe that would be a better thing for the region and for world peace.
Right. Well, so I guess what.
Can I respond? Can I respond?
Yeah.
Well, just before I say another word, there's quite a bit of static noise. Not when you speak, Max, but when Doug speaks. There's quite a bit of static, that comes in the background.
I think it's because
I can make up what he's saying, but with difficulty.
Okay, Doug, if you just, Doug, I know you made your volume louder, and I think it was.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just make it a little bit lower, it'll probably remove some of the static. But you're coming in, clear enough to understand you, so don't worry too much.
Okay, I'll try. I just lowered it a little bit. I don't know if that helps. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, you're good.
That's very good. Very good. Well, in saying let's keep Assad in power, then. Well, basically, all what non-Syrians have to do is leave Syria alone. Let the Syrian people decide. If the USA, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, the anti-Syrian coalition in Lebanon, as I call them, if they butt out of it, if they mind their own business, then
no, I'm
Syria
sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we can, even if we stepped aside, it's the rebels, and like you said, Assad has to fight the rebels, and no matter what we say, sitting here or anywhere in the world, he's got the problem of dealing with the rebels, and the outside world is not. The Syrian people are not going to decide. It's the rebels who are going to decide. Unless the Syrian people rise up against the rebels, I don't believe that's possible, is it?
Well, to begin with, the rebels are by and large coming from outside. They are. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And there has been a number of occasions in which the civilians have risen against the rebels. Yes, I mean, that's the simple answer to your question.
Well, I know. Recently, I posted an article that they bombed the Yarmouk refugee camp outside of Damascus. They bombed it. The Assad's forces bombed it. So, and if it's true that a small number of residents are these rebels, and that the majority of people in Yarmouk, which I think is a little over 10,000, are loyal to Assad, then they've got a rat in their midst, and they've got to eliminate these. If the people can rise up and defeat the rebels, fine, but it doesn't seem like Assad's able to do it by himself or with his army.
Well, I haven't heard about details about Yarmouk. I've heard little hints and insinuations from different friends here, which again repeat the same old cliche. The rebels take the fight to a soft target. and for them to rally support, to rally Arab support, they thought of the Yarmouk camp as one of those soft targets. Well, let's play the Palestinian card here. Let's take the fight to a Palestinian territory, as it were, so we can get really more support from other Arab brothers. But it didn't work. They have tried everything in their book. They have thrown everything they can throw on Assad. And so far, he's standing firm because, number one, the majority of the people are behind him, and the army is united and stands behind him. And Doug, let me say something to you here. We really shouldn't change the subject, and I'm not trying to change the subject. If we are going to have peace in the Middle East, and I hope that we will one day, I haven't lost hope yet. Syria and Israel can have peace if you have a secular, rational government ruling Syria.
Yes.
But Israel and the Muslim Brotherhood will not be able to negotiate.
No.
I do not want to see any party in the Middle East ruling any country with a policy of exclusion. It's only me and nobody else. And those rebels, without any doubt, even though the initial uprising in Syria had calls in it for reform, it wasn't all about reform, but there were people there who inspired by this so-called Arab Spring, which is nothing really but a big fat joke. And they thought, well, the Libyans were able to get rid of their ruler, the Egyptians were able to do the same. Well, we want also here, a better democracy. And of course, we know what happened in Egypt, we know what happened in Libya, and I agree with you, Doug. And we do not want the same thing happen in Syria, because Syria is the only shining beacon in the Arab world. It's the only remaining shining beacon in which you have secular...
Ghassan, what happens if the rebels are able to surround the palace or whatever in Damascus where Assad is holed up, and they're able to go inside and drag him out in the streets like they did to Gaddafi and find Saddam Hussein and they kill Assad, then the rebels take over, no?
Look, to begin with, this is a very, very highly unlikely scenario. I don't think it can happen. But as I said before, on the first of those 3 appearances that I've thus far made on Vonvo, the situation in Syria is not about the person of Bashar al-Assad. It is about the Syrian people, on one hand, who are by and large civilized, secular, and against that's on one hand, and on the other hand, you have a minority group of fanatics who have an ulterior agenda. So even if, God forbid, Assad meets some unsavory fate, I don't think it will mean the end of it. It will not mean the end of it at all, because it's not about him personally. You see, like in Libya, on the other hand, it was about Gaddafi, because Gaddafi was a man who wrote a book who would tell people how to eat, how
Did he just break out for you, Doug?
Gaddafi.
All right, there he's back.
When he went away, everything collapsed with him. He was like the foundation of that big tower, and when that foundation was removed, the tower collapsed.
So you mean if Assad disappears? If Assad disappears, there's people standing behind him to take over. There's a people behind, more Alawites.
Go ahead.
As I was saying, Doug, Gaddafi was the foundation of the tower. When he was removed, the tower collapsed. But Assad is not the foundation of the tower. He's the crown and the jewel of the tower. And if the jewel and the crown get removed, they can replace with another jewel, because Syria has many, many jewels.
Another Alawite.
Right, and so
the rule in Syria, well, in fact,
Ghassan,
Max, let me answer, please.
Okay,
please,
then I'd like to ask you a question after Ghassan.
The only religion, the only Max, may I answer? May I answer some?
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Specifically,
Go ahead.
may I answer that statement that he made?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. The only time that we can guarantee the religion, the only time that we can, with certainty, 100% certainty, guarantee the religion of a ruler or a president or prime, because you will never have a prime minister of Israel that is not Jewish. But it does not mean that you cannot have a president of Syria who's not an Alawi. There is nothing in the constitution of Syria that stipulates that the president has to be Alawi. Well, in fact, in Lebanon, the president has to be a Maronite, but that's by consensus. In Lebanon, it is by consensus of the people. But there is nothing in the Syrian constitution that stipulates that the president has to be Alawi.
Right. So, Ghassan, can I come in and ask you a quick question?
You sure can.
Okay. So there's all this talk about, Syria being a secular state, and that's like the one thing that, you are really, adamant about and think that needs to, stay true to any new Syrian government or Syria going forward. I mean, with all this talk about being secular, there will be a lot of people that will, blame this civil war in Syria. They'll blame it on the fact that Assad is an Alawite, and then you have, this whole Sunni Shiite controversy, that's constantly going on, and more particularly in Iran, I believe. I'm sorry, I'm not an expert, but like, what I guess I wanted to ask you is like, taking all that into account, why do you think this whole secular argument really holds true if there are a lot of people that will argue about, this whole thing is caused by him being an Alawite, and then, there you go, going into religion, taking over and kind of going against, the argument of being a truly secular country. Do I have a point here at all? I'm just posing it in a question.
Yes, I hear you fairly well, and I thank you for this question again. The only time that this issue of why are we ruled by an Alawite comes up is when you hear it from the mouth of a fundamentalist Islamist. Because they say, we the Sunnis here are a majority and we should rule. And because other people from other religions are in the presidency, they feel that it is their rightful entity. So, but this does not represent, that's what you have to keep in mind. This does not represent the majority of Sunnis. By far it doesn't. It's only those minority voices which are probably, I haven't done any statistical work here, but I would say more than 10% of Sunnis in Syria would be in favor of such argument. So when you hear this argument, you have to ask the question, who is making this argument? Who is the person behind this argument? Is it a fair-minded person? Is it a secular-minded person? Or is it a person with an Islamist fundamentalist agenda?
And what exact, I mean, when it comes to the Islamist fundamentalist agenda, can you just describe for myself a little bit more particular what that entails?
Well,
Sharia law.
Yes, I can. Well, exactly. I mean, if you look at Taliban Afghanistan, you would get a very good idea. That kind of thing.
Okay.
There are already places in Syria that have gone under the control of the armed militants, specifically Jabhat al-Nusra, and they are forcing women, for example, to wear the veil, the burqa. And they are also sending flyers around warning women not to drive cars, telling them that if they are caught driving cars, they're going to be arrested, raped, and killed. This is the kind of regime that this so-called gallant revolution is going to bring into
It's happening
Syria.
in England, too. It's happening in England and Germany and France, too. It's all over the world.
And it is very, very ironic. It's very ironic that the West is waging a huge war against fundamentalism all over the world, virtually all over the world.
Right.
And it is encouraging it, sponsoring it, and supporting it in Syria.
That's right, isn't it?
Very, very short.
That's 100% right on. That is the whole crux of the problem. That is what I see. That is what you see. That is what anybody can see, except for the leaders of these countries.
So
and the media.
So so Doug, knowing that, what then needs to occur? I mean, if it's so evident that that's it, then what is really the major disconnect going on?
Well, I don't know. At first, when I first got involved with this several months ago, I said, "Oh, great! Let's get rid of Assad and we'll put in a democracy." This is what my point was last week, and everything will be hunky dory. Everything will be rosy. Everything will be wonderful. But it can't happen because of the Muslim Brotherhood is in the way, I believe. And when I made a comment that a dictator needs to rule these Arab peoples, who, everyone jumped on my case and said, "Oh my God, you're crazy," but the iron fist that Ghassan mentioned, in order to get the country into a secular position, if it is true now that I hear that Assad was and his father were for secularism, and they were using that iron fist to keep down these radical Islamists, then my attitude changed from several months ago, and I swallowed all the garbage that the media and everybody else was throwing out, and without thinking. And now that I've looked into it much deeper, and I've been lucky enough to participate in your discussions, I realized that the best thing for these people, I'd love everyone in the world to have a democracy and a Congress and a House of Representatives, but it's not going to work in some of these countries. They need to have a ruler who can control the craziness that goes on with these minority groups.
Right.
Can I say something here?
Yeah.
You see, the thing is, in Syria, if you want to refer to Bashar al-Assad as a dictator, it doesn't really mean that he is not. I know I'm repeating myself here, but I must emphasize this, having heard what Doug has said. It doesn't mean that he is someone that is there on top of his people against their will. They want him to be there. They do support. So it's not like they are ruled by this ruthless dictator they have been forced.
What you're saying is there are good dictators and there are bad dictators. And what I was taught in school, since I was a child, was that all dictators are bad. But I guess all dictators are not bad.
There is benevolent dictatorship. There is such a thing.
Yes.
But by the way, Max, I was at my Facebook page, and there was this thread of lashing back and forth that went all over the place. And there's this lady, I can't remember her name, not to mention it, even if I did, a Syrian lady that appeared quite elegant with a you could see the portrait of her face and head, and obviously she was uncovered, and she was as unveiled, and she was supporting, the rebels, and said things to the effect that I should be ashamed of myself for supporting the government. If this lady hears this conversation, I would like her to know that if that so-called revolution wins, she will be made to cover her hair. A great liberty will be taken away from her. She will not be able to allow to drive a car, among other things. She may not be even allowed to work, or voice, or have a Facebook page.
Right. So Ghassan, what I just want to ask now, because I think this is really great, what you guys are both talking about. What I want to ask you though is, there's, when it comes to Assad, you would have to think that there was some things that this man was doing that were, I don't know, inappropriate, just not correct forms of being, let's say, I think, a good dictator. What exactly, there had to have been some cause that got this, in the beginning it was peaceful, let's say, demonstrations against him in the beginning, right? What was he doing that, at least caused that? Now it's very late to figure out what this whole thing has turned into, because it's now a straight up civil war. But when it was just peaceful, let's say, riots or protests in the beginning, what were they protesting against? What did this man do that, let's say, wasn't, very good
Very good question.
good dictatorial leadership? Because I think if you're gonna, obviously, I really appreciate your opinion coming on here and sharing these facts about Assad that people are not getting in the media. But I think it's also really important, at least, to know what, let's say, he did do wrong.
Yeah, excellent question. Excellent.
Are you asking me the question?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, in my view, and in the view of all secular, fair-minded, even-headed Syrians that I know, the improper thing that Bashar was doing was not stamping out corruption quickly enough. There was a lot of corruption in Syria. There still is. Well, of course, there's corruption everywhere in the world, but perhaps in Syria it was going a little bit too far. And of course, so the protesters were fed up with corruption. Some of them were fed up with the slowness in which the reform were taking place. So they wanted to see quicker changes. They wanted to see, like going into a type of Western-style democracy quicker than what the government was pushing for. So those people went out in the streets, perhaps in big numbers, but mind you, there was no protests in the big cities of Damascus and Aleppo. Those protests that you saw initially were in much smaller towns. And then when that happened, the people with an ulterior motive, agenda, would have said to themselves, yippee, here we go. There's already a bandwagon here. Let's jump on it. So they jumped on the bandwagon with their Islamist agenda. So there was two types of people. The ones who were with a genuine motive to push for reform, and the ones who took advantage of the situation to stir up trouble. And the ones who became militarized later on, of course, are the troublemakers. And a lot of people who were initially in favor of reform, when they saw what happened, when they saw how this revolution, if you want to call it, was hijacked, they said to themselves, no, we are not going to fall into this trap, in as much as we don't like some of the actions of government, but given the alternative, no, we are now going to support our government, stand behind it 100%. Given the choice between those two, I'm going to support the government because I do not want to allow a Taliban-like government in Syria. I hope this answers your question. So there was two types of dissent. One that comes from people who wanted reform, and I'm for that 100%, and I would like to believe that Bashar himself is one of those people. And the other group that voiced their dissent are the militants, the fundamentalists, who have an agenda of overthrowing the government and ruling with a shadow government.
Max.
Yeah.
Max.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah. Very interesting statement there by Ghassan. When I first heard Assad's reaction in the beginning, it was that foreigners were causing you all these problems, that it wasn't the people of Syria. And my initial thought was, oh, that's a good one, I don't believe that. It's the people of Syria that that are rising up against Assad. I believe I thought his statement was a total lie, but after hearing Ghassan's description of what the actual feeling is in Syria, I now realize that when he said that foreign fighters were the troublemakers, that he was 100% right.
Right. So
thank you, Doug.
Right. So, I mean, what I think would be interesting is to hear Doug. I mean, just what if what Ghassan is saying is true, and obviously we're going to hold him to that. We're going to respect his opinion. If what he's saying is true, Doug, do you think that those items for at least having peaceful riots at first, and then it turning into what it is now, do you think that is reason, to have what's going on right now, a civil war? I mean, like you obviously you were born in America, so you know what America's civil war was about. Do you think that, not that I'm trying to compare the two at all, but I'm saying, do you think that it sounds from what Ghassan is saying, any reason for this country to be in the state that it is right now?
No, it sounds like from what he's saying that this small minority has hijacked the movement that was complaining about certain that lack of progress in fighting corruption, and these peaceful protests were hijacked by a small minority of people, and then once they hijacked it, a lot of other Syrians jumped on their bandwagon and grabbed guns and joined their movement. So their movement has grown from a handful of dissidents to a small army of people. But if I still believe what Ghassan said, that the majority of Syrians are probably against turning Syria into anything but a secular country. I still think that the average Syrian probably sits at an outdoor cafe in Damascus and has a beer and maybe eats some pork and is pretty happy. And if he had to give up his beer and his pork, and his wife sitting next to him would have to cover her face, and the average Syrian would not be too happy with that type of change brought to their country.
Right. Ghassan.
Well, it's not just about beer and pork here, but I understand the analogy. Yeah, it's a good picture. Quite right.
Right. So Ghassan, Abdel, who's watching the conversation, asks a question. Assad had an army of 700,000 people. Where are they now?
How would I know?
No idea.
all I know is that I do not see big defections in the army. That's what counts. I'm privy to information as the whereabouts and the movements of the Syrian army. Surely, I mean, Abdul Wahab cannot expect me to be able to answer this question.
Right. Yeah. I didn't know if maybe he thought that you might have some other existing information that maybe he wanted to be informed about, for his own understanding. But not a problem.
But it is possible, Max, it is possible that Abdul Wahab is asking this question tongue-in-cheek, in the sense that there is this massive army to restore peace and order. And again, I'm not a military strategist, but I cannot answer this question. I think that enough force is used in the right places. And mind you, 700,000 strong army in a country as big as Syria, in the event of because this is not a war ongoing, you all of your forces in one place. You have to be a very good strategist and say, look, I'm going to keep one regiment here, 2 regiments there. So if he is trying to insinuate that the army is not here to show its presence, he is 100% wrong.
Right. So I guess what his follow-up question, and it sounds like this is the context he was trying to ask that question in. In the text chat, he says, "If Assad's own soldiers aren't with him, how can you expect the people to be?"
I didn't hear you properly. Can you come again, please?
Yeah, I said it looks like Abdel, put in context where his question was coming from, and he says, if Assad's own soldiers aren't with him, how can you expect the people to be?
But they are with him. They are with him. They're doing all sorts of roles. They are fighting battles where battlefronts are open to them, right, left, and center. They need to protect civilians caught in crossfire. They're doing all sorts of things. And of course, don't forget that you have a 1,000-kilometer front, well, not quite front, but borderline with Turkey. You've got a big chunk of the Syrian army that would be sitting in the Golan, borders with Lebanon, borders with Jordan. Syria is, if anything, it would be perhaps a little bit overstretched, because they have to not just fight the war internally, but also keep a very close eye on the borders and try to stop as much infiltration as possible. But mind you, Max and Abdul Wahab, the Syrian army has not called in the reserves. So they have to be in a very, very comfortable position. They don't even need the reserve.
Great. It looks like we have Rafi. How are you?
I'm great. Can you hear me?
Yep. I hear you just fine. Ghassan and Doug, do you hear Rafi okay?
Yes.
I thought that we were going to be closing up in a few seconds.
Tell him to sit down.
Okay. I guess then, Ghassan, if you have to wrap up, Rafi, did you have something that you wanted to ask Ghassan? Ghassan, do you have to leave shortly?
Tell Rafi to comb his hair and sit down.
I'm sitting down, but the computer's on my lap, like flatter surface.
Okay, that's better.
Okay.
Rafi, did you want to?
No, I can stay. I can stay for a few more minutes. But before Rafi says
sure. Ghassan, are you from Syria? I didn't catch the beginning of this.
Just a second, please. Just a second. This time last week, when Doug came in, all of a sudden he didn't introduce himself. Sorry, Doug, I'm not trying to take this personally on you here. And I'm not trying to teach you how to run the program next. But you cannot have people coming in the last moment without introducing themselves, without taking this pledge of sticking to the subject.
Right.
They all of a sudden appear, and they may try to change the subject and take it on a tangent. We can't let that happen.
Yeah.
Before Rafi says a word, I would like him, if you don't mind,
that's fine,
to define himself like we did, and try to see what he wants to talk about, provided that it is within the subject, which is the civil war in Syria.
Yeah, and Ghassan, Rafi has appeared on Vonvo before, and he's more than happy to do that. But Rafi, you want to just tell Ghassan?
From what I understand, the subject is...
Rafi, you want to just give a quick background of yourself for Ghassan?
Sure. My name is Rafi from the United States. I work in biotechnology, and on the side I've done, various peace activism type things here in Israel, like peace projects.
Did he say he was
what's going on in Syria, or at least how we in Israel perceive it, and what our concerns are, what our hopes are, etc.
Great.
And, just I know what the story is.
Right. And Rafi, did you want to ask Ghassan or Doug something in particular that you caught while you were listening about this subject?
I'm not sure exactly what to ask. I wanted to know a little bit about Ghassan. I'm sorry if I missed it at the beginning. He was talking about the vast majority of Syrians being behind the Assad regime, which is not at least what we're led to believe in the media. And as well, if he thinks it's going to be, he would like to see Assad stay in charge to make a secular regime in Syria. Why does he believe that if free elections and fair elections were held throughout Syria, a secular government would actually arise through that process? And what would it take? As well as, any other sort of governmental reforms, as long as you would do, some kind of democratic alternative to the current structure in Syria.
Well, if people in Syria vote with their minds, the minds that I listen to, then yes, they will be voting for a secular government. I have no doubt. Now, when will Syria go to an open democratic election, as it were? I don't know. I can't tell you. But it wasn't long ago when the president was talking about holding an election. And at the moment, even though it's not perhaps recognized by the West as something equivalent to a parliament house or a congress, but Syria does have a parliament, Majlis al-Shab. It does have elected members, and it is a totally secular presentation. You don't go, like in Lebanon, for example, members of parliament represent, they are voted to, to represent a particular sect, a particular religion and a religious sect. In Syria, that's not the way elections are held at all. The system in Syria, as I keep saying, and I keep repeating myself, it is already a secular system. The only reform that Syria needed was to stamp out corruption and to implement other changes that will bring it more in line with more political openness, perhaps. I wouldn't be personally, I mean, again, it's not for me to decide, that's for the Syrian people to decide. But I personally, and I know I could be changing the subject here again, but I'm not exactly 100% in favor of Western democracy. That really gives you the choice between two people rather than being stuck with one, as in the case of dictatorship. But let's not change the subject. The point is, Syria is already a secular state, to answer your question, Rafi, and I firmly believe, that given the chance to go to the polls again, the Syrians will also vote on a secular state.
So, that would be great. I'd love to see them have a secular government. I mean, and you're saying that they already do. I'm also, I feel like maybe issues of reform that they could take over, for example, in the Kurdish region and in the Alawite region and in other regions, maybe they would benefit by some kind of federal system whereby each region would have its own sort of localized government instead of feeling like there was a competition for, should we have a Kurdish prime minister, or should we have a Alawite prime minister, or a Sunni prime minister, and sort of, like is done in a lot of other countries, like even in America, where you have separate states for different regions.
I have lost.
Are you losing? You're not hearing what I'm saying?
I heard most of it, all of it, but I got the gist of it. Look, if we start doing this in Syria, have a Kurdish canton and an Alawi canton, then that's the first step towards breaking up the country on a sectarian basis. No, this is totally unacceptable. It would be the first step towards national suicide. We don't want that at all. We do have a secular national government. There are certain issues with the Kurdish community, I understand. Hopefully they will be resolved. That will be one of the things that will also need to be addressed in as far as it's concerned. Some Kurds in Syria are not Syrian citizens. For some reason they didn't get nationalized. If you hear the different sides of the debate, you hear different stories. But it would seem that some people did not initially go to have their names registered when the initial census took place, and missed out on being Syrian citizens, and this thing became a legacy, and it was a bit difficult to correct because of red tape and all of that. So this has to be resolved one way or the other. You cannot have people living in your country, nationals living in your country, without bearing the national citizenship of that country. That's a big mistake. That's a big fault that has to be corrected. I agree. But to say that we should have
do you believe that if it was
with a Kurdish prime minister and then another one for segregation, totally anti-secular and against the philosophy of secularism, you cannot have the two together. You cannot have little sectarian regions and a federal secular government. You just can't have
I mean, you do. You have it in the United States of America works like that.
No, states. You can't compare states.
States of America have states.
And
The states are
You don't
secular.
have
I mean, do you think if there was a...
I mean, with the exception of Utah,
What is Canada?
a Mormon state, but it's not Mormon. Utah is not a Mormon state by. It's Mormon by difference. There is no such thing in the United States as a religious state as such. They're different.
I'm not saying they should make a religious
and that's
state,
why the
but they can
federation
still make...
is able to be secular.
Right. Now they can have regional cantons. They can't declare this is the Kurdish canton and only Kurds can live here. I mean, that's silly. But you can just say this is the state and it happens to be majority Kurdish. This is the state, it happens to be majority Alawite. Like you have in America, you have this is the state and it happens to be a majority, Mormons, or this is a majority Catholic state, or whatever it is. I mean, it doesn't really... It's not
You don't have that. You don't have that in the United States.
Right, you just have states. You have different regions, and you're free to live in any region. I mean, I think you probably
all of those
should
regions.
say...
Apples to oranges.
I mean, they have it in Canada. You have Ontario and Quebec and
You see,
Quebec.
all of those regions that you're talking about out
Yeah, are what?
there. Rafi, all of those regions you're talking about, they already have their representation in the Syrian parliament. And, I mean, honestly, let's leave the subject alone because it's not for you and me to decide anyway. It's what the Syrian people want.
Right, and you don't think the Syrian people are participating in a revolution? You think they would rather not have direct elections for their prime minister? I mean, how... I don't know. I can't really match that with secularism. I can't agree that it's a secular country. I mean, whatever secular means, but it's not a totally free society if you can't elect the president of your country.
Well, and
the person who makes your decision.
Well,
Then it's not your country. It's Bashar Assad's country.
Rafi?
Yeah?
Yeah, I have been to Syria many times. I don't believe you have. And... I mean, I go to Syria on a regular basis now because of the trouble. But Syria is a free country. People do vote for their president. It's not on two-party system basis like it is, in the West. But they do hold elections. And, your question really does not add up because it has nothing to do with the revolution as it were. Because you're saying in the beginning, are the Syrian people participating in the revolution? Some of them are, a very, very small minority are, and a smaller minority are actually carrying guns. So the bigger force of the fight, and we've discussed that before you.
Well, Ghassan,
most of them, no doubt about it, are coming from other places, from Libya, Chechnya, Yemen, Algeria, Tunisia, you name it. And you see their names, especially after they get ill. This is how you find out the identity of the soldiers. When they get killed or when they get captured, this is where when you know for sure, without any speck of doubt, where they have come from. Yes, Max?
Ghassan, what I wanted to ask you about is it was a few days ago on CNN, there was some woman who was speaking and about Syria, and like her family had gotten captured. It was some guy... some like professor, and it got a lot of publicity here in the States. The guy's name was like Zaydoun, and on the media, I mean, this woman was originally from Syria, and it was her family. The remarks that were this guy got captured by like what was called secret Syrian police, and he was captured because he was part of, I guess, the revolution of Syrians who are participating in this. and was speaking out against his government. And the words that were coming from the guest on CNN was, this was the first time that he was able to speak out against his government while this, civil war was going on. I don't know whether or not he...
Breaking up.
Do you hear me now?
I'm sorry.
Do you hear me now? Ghassan, do you hear me?
I can hear you now. You were breaking up, but I think I heard most of it. You were talking about someone who was captured by the secret police.
Right, and
were you?
Yeah, and he was captured for speaking out against the government, and according to him, it was the first time in his, 50 years of living in Syria that he was able to speak out against his government. And I wanted to find out from you if that is a relevant claim that, before this civil war, there was no, you couldn't speak out badly against the Assad regime. That was uncalled for, and that, was not allowed. Is that a true statement, you think?
He already said it. He ruled with an iron fist. So when you rule with an iron fist, you rule with an iron fist.
Right, but in that sense, is it? Go ahead, Ghassan.
There are iron fists and iron fists. Look, there are iron fists and iron fists. Look, there are red lines in Syria. There's no doubt. No one is denying that. I'm not saying that in Syria you have the same kind of free journalism and political life that you would experience in the West. But again, it is because the country is in a state of war. It has emerged from 400 years of Turkish rule, and it is still in the process of building a national, secular, strong nation. You need to go through these phases by bit. You cannot go and give total political freedom to a state, to a country in which this natural process of development has taken place here. Plus, keep in mind that you cannot expect the whole world to endorse West-style democracy. It doesn't happen that way. It doesn't necessarily work all over the world. And quite honestly, I cannot even see it working in the West. And if you look at the French Revolution, when we look at the French Revolution as the revolution of all revolutions, as the mother of all revolutions, democracy did not really establish itself properly until about 100 years later. Because after the French Revolution, you had this iron fist rule of Robespierre, who was a headhunter more than anything else. And then, of course, we went back to monarchy. And even worse, you had Napoleon, who was an emperor. And Napoleon III. It took almost 100 years until the French system established the proper democracy, the First Republic, Second Republic, etc., etc. And now I think we're up to the fifth one. So these processes take quite a bit of time. We are talking in Syria here about a situation in which you have a core of legitimacy, unity, secularism, nationalism, nationalism from a Nazi perspective, like patriotism, I should use, nationalism. And then on the other hand, you have a handful of people who want to take the country back to the doldrums of the Dark Ages. Which of those two would I choose? If I want to use one grey cell in my brain, which one will I choose? And I'm not saying in this instance that they are both bad and I'm going to choose the one that is lesser evil. What I'm saying here is one is in fact very, very good, and it needs support, endorsement, and patience. And I believe that the Assad legacy, the Assad rule to Syria, has been the best thing that has ever happened to Syria for a very, very long time. And history will talk about it without any doubt.
Okay, Doug, did you want to respond? Or Rafi, did you have a response?
I don't necessarily agree that you should just leave someone as a dictator in his country, especially when 60,000 people have been killed. And the reports are that they were killed, civilians were killed by Assad's army. So I don't know if I necessarily buy the story that most Syrians are not fighting against the army and are for the army. Otherwise, why would they be in conflict with the army and so many people getting killed? It just doesn't add up to me. As well, I don't think it's legitimate to say that, you know, a country that wants to be secular and modern, as people are claiming, necessarily needs a dictator to tell everyone what to do for an indefinite period of time until they grow up and earn their right to liberty and freedom. I mean, that, you know, the United States of America, where I come from, was founded on the principle of a book called The Rights of Man, the idea that people don't deserve to have a dictator appointed for them and tell them what to do. And if someone's doing that to you, it is your obligation as a citizen of your country to liberate your people. I mean, that's the American value. So I don't know how I can square it by saying, oh, we'll just let it slide. Hey, had to kill a few people to stay in charge. I mean, it's like, you know, backing up Saddam Hussein or any other country. I mean, a dictator, a king that with a constitutional monarchy and the people still like him and he's not actually killing people, I guess let it live, like the King of England, you know, or the Queen of England. Who really cares that they have a queen? It's not really hurting them. You know, and they have a democratically elected prime minister who's representing them and that they voted for. But to have someone who's the dictator, who's, you know, controls the legislation, controls the decisions of the military, controls everything, and there's no ability for the people to replace him, I mean, that's tyranny. I can't agree that that's freedom and that that's the best thing for the Syrians. I mean, I would certainly not necessarily want to see a civil war destroy Syria and take it to pieces. And I don't necessarily think that that's the best thing. I think a diplomatic solution is what people should seek, where there's a peaceful transition of power towards a democratically elected government. And if Assad wins the election, fair and square, I would say give it to him. In a system with a constitution where he is the elected leader with term limits, fine, let him elect it. I'm not sure that he would really get elected. But if he wants to prove it, that he is the most popular man in Syria, let him take it to the polls, you know? Otherwise, I think he should transition his way out of power, and the Syrian people should elect their own leadership. And I'm not saying it should be the Muslim Brotherhood. And if you're concerned that really, in truth, the majority of Syrians would elect the Muslim Brotherhood to run your country or run, you know, country you like to go to, and that's the problem, then, I mean, that's sort of a cultural issue. And in that case, that's why I'm saying more regional representation, so that regions that are more secular could not be controlled by fundamentalists the same way, and there's more of a division of power. But you know, if they could choose whatever legitimate government that they want, it's their lives, and I think they deserve it.
Doug, did you want to say something?
If I may respond, Max.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I don't know how much more time you're going to allocate for this. We've already gone 20 minutes past, the allocated time.
Well, yeah, and Ghassan, you can.
I'll just make a comment on that.
Yeah, and you can speak for as long as you want. There's no time limit or anything.
Okay, fine. Rafi, you mentioned that 60 people got killed. Yes, maybe more. 60,000, I beg your pardon. The truth is that you cannot certainly say that they were all killed by the government. According to the information that I get, I would like to believe that most of them, in fact, were killed by the opposition forces. And I'm going to make my reply here very, very short and swift and sweet. I can think of one person, one great leader, in fact, who had to accept the killing of many of his people in order to make his nation the great nation that it ought to be. And he accepted civil war in his country to reach that objective. The name of the man was Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah. Right, and Abraham Lincoln was democratically elected by his country twice.
Well, so is Bashar al-Assad. So is Bashar.
Doug, did you want to come in here? Doug, I don't hear you. Can't hear you, Doug. If you leave the room and come back, I'm sure or turn your volume up.
Can,
oh, there we go. There you go.
Is that,
yeah, there you go.
All right. Yeah. I turned it down because I'm watching golf. But just wanted to say I've been listening to Ghassan and saying that the people of Syria are behind Assad and that he needed an iron fist. They needed a person with an iron fist to bring changes to Syria. But now Rafi shows up and has a great point. Let's have an election. Let's let the people of Syria are sincerely behind Assad, he'll be re-elected, and I'll accept that fact. But if someone else rises, some other secular person wins the election, let him be president and bring these changes. Obviously, Assad has not been quick enough in bringing changes to Syria, so it gives someone else a chance. But the problem is, what happens if they hold an election and the Muslim Brotherhood wins?
Muslim Brotherhoods would never win in Syria. They may win a war, God forbid. But before any of these things happen, now Doug and Rafi are both talking about going to the polls. There is a war. There is a war regime. You cannot go to the polls before this war finishes, one way or the other. You know, it's just like if you are sick in hospital with a major disease. You're not going to worry about doing a little nose job. You know, you just do things one step at a time. You have to prioritize. Now the war has to be won by the government. That's according to my belief, before you can move forward. Because if the opposition wins, you are not going to be moving forward. You're not going to be having any elections. You're going to have, if the opposition wins, God forbid. First of all, they will start fighting each other. And after they fight each other for years and years and years, maybe one of those groups will win. And when that group wins, it's going to be the most fundamental of them all. Just exactly so during the rise of power of Islamists in Afghanistan. I can't remember the names of all of the groups. We had Mujahideen and then others and others and others. It was like a crescendo of fundamentalism ending up with Taliban. And that's the likely scenario that's going to happen in Syria. So if we are going to have any chance for any election at all, number one, this war has to be won. Number two, it has to be won by the government.
I don't necessarily know if it's going to be won by the government. I mean, I only see the chance for the opposition winning if the international community sets up a no-fly zone and gets involved like they did in Libya. Otherwise, the government has air superiority, and they're going to be able to maintain indefinitely. That's what I think. And you know, the Syrian rebel forces may, carve out a little territory for them, sort of like, how FARC does in Colombia or something like that. And there may just be some sort of rebel province going on. But I think in order to resolve that, I don't see a total victory for Assad, short of international intervention also on his part. I think it's really a permanent stalemate. And in order for us, for the rest of the world to sort of see this move on, we should encourage both sides to sit down and talk about some kind of political resolution. And if the opposition doesn't want to see Assad stay in power, or at least calls for an elections by the people, then I think that would be the most realistic solution, and somehow how to get there. And I heard it today from King Abdullah talking to the BBC about how he thinks there should be a transition to a new elected government, and that's basically the best thing for both sides, because otherwise they're in an intractable war. It's going to be a long-term situation that they've set up for themselves. It's just going to be regions of rebels, regions of the government, and the situation in permanent chaos.
Well, implementing a no-fly zone in Syria and a NATO intervention would be the silliest military gamble NATO could ever do. Because the only thing that has been stopping this conflict from escalating further and spreading much, much further beyond the borders of Syria is the fact that NATO has kept its nose out of the joint. If NATO interferes, I mean, do you have any idea, Rafi, how widespread this conflict, military conflict? It can involve Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf nations, without any doubt Israel. Israel will be the first to be targeted by the anti-NATO forces of the region. It is going to become a huge mess in the event of any NATO intervention. So keep that in mind. It's not going to be a walk in the park. Syria is not Libya. Syria is not Libya.
I understand.
Yeah. Look, I honestly think, and I think I said that before you came in, Rafi. The best thing to do in this instance is for the rest of the world to butt out. Just leave Syria alone. Let Syrian people decide what they want. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, USA, France, UK, all of them, Germany, just stay out. It's not your problem. It's not your land. It's not your fight. It's not your territory. And I do not believe for one moment that the West, any of the Western nations, or the government or people of Saudi Arabia and Qatar care about the Syrian people. And I do not believe that the king of Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, or the emir of Qatar are promoters of democracy and beacons of liberty. They are the most oppressive dictators on the face of the planet. And it is very ironic to see that these people are in fact trying to make everyone believe that they care about the Syrian people. All they care about is the gas and petrol control, etc., etc. All the West cares about is to put its hand on the resources of the Middle East. And I'm not going to mention Israel here, even though I don't want to take the subject to Israel because it's not within the subject. It is not the subject of this conversation. But there are two issues in the Middle East here in which the West has a vested interest. The long-term security of Israel and securing gas and petrol resources. It's not about freedom, it's not about democracy, and it's not about liberalizing Syrians. If you want the Syrians to be liberated, leave them alone, and they will choose.
I don't know. I think it's very difficult for them to choose in the middle of a war. I think the best thing we could do is to try to encourage them to stop having a war with each other. And then, I believe there's a good number of Syrians that are not with Assad, otherwise they wouldn't be in a conflict. And, regardless of to what extent they're being supported by various outside interests and influences, there is certainly a civil war in Syria, which is a war between Syrians that are fighting over control of their own country. And they should do so in a diplomatic fashion and not on the battlefield because they're in an intractable situation. I think that they've entered into a system, to say the least. And, I don't know about out of it. As far as shouldn't be necessarily funding the rebels who might be Al-Qaeda members, I would agree. Not checking who you're giving weapons to when you could be giving weapons to terrorists or, could massacre civilians as well. It's also a bit irresponsible, and it's hard to decide who are the good guys. But when you say that the right thing for you to do is to sit them all down and get them to stop shooting at each other, I think that's the most responsible position. And to try to say, I'm going to pick a side, I think the Assad people should win, really defeat everyone else who is uprising against him, especially when there are people, and a good amount of them, who have seemingly legitimate complaints and have been attacked, that we should encourage anywhere in the world, I think.
Look, the two things I really have Max. I honestly have to go soon.
No problem,
And
Ghassan.
yeah, the connection is becoming very, very weak and very bad. I could barely hear what Rafi was saying. But just to wrap it up for myself before I go, I never said, Rafi, that there are no Syrians who are carrying guns against Assad, but they're a very, very small minority. And you cannot negotiate with the agenda of that revolution. You simply cannot negotiate with fundamentalists. And I'm sure that you have your version of fundamentalists, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And this is why I was saying that to go forward, number one, this war has to end. It has to be won. It has to be won by the government, because if the other side wins, you will not be able to negotiate. I am repeating myself, I know, but this is what I want to say as a final closing statement.
Fair enough.
And I do have to go.
Thank you,
Okay,
Ghassan.
well, thank you again, Max, for the opportunity. Thank you, Rafi, and Dr. Wade left us not too long ago.
Thank you.